Hello, my name is Dr. Lisa Montaigne. Today I'm sharing with you the results of a study that I did to determine how well online students are performing on student learning outcomes. As you can see, my topic is student learning outcomes and pedagogy in face-to-face and online college courses. The study uses the social sciences format and protocol established by the APA. I originally did this research for my 5-chapter doctoral dissertation in education. In this presentation, I'm going to quickly lead you through the background foundation of the study, the mixed methods design of the study, and the quantitative and qualitative findings of the study. However, I will spend the bulk of this time we have together on a summary and interpretations of the findings and their possible significance for you. I am interested in this topic because I've been teaching online for 11 years as a part of my teaching assignments, and I wanted to assess what students are actually learning in online classes and compare that with traditional face-to-face learning. Since I'm an English instructor at the community college level, I use lower division English composition courses to do this analysis. I also conduct research as a Carnegie Research Fellow and through Cal State Fullerton's Research Foundation, the Center for Research in Educational Leadership. Many English departments in the community college system have implemented student learning outcomes in recent years, and they still have just started to use them as measures in program reviews for self-assessment as well as accreditation. As a result, more studies such as this one in English composition courses may begin to emerge. In addition to using SLOs to measure success for program reviews, they are also useful for faculty as touch points for discussion and refining curriculum goals. Also, face-to-face and online students should be performing equally on SLOs. And online delivery is proliferating quickly, and it is such a young field that a lot of work needs to be done in this area. The purpose of this study was to determine if there are any statistical differences between the two groups and to explore students' perceptions of the effectiveness of pedagogy used in both modes of delivery. And also, the study aimed to explore and contribute to the path of success for all students. Ultimately, I would like this research to benefit both online programs and face-to-face programs, in fact, perhaps to affect policy making and curriculum development. Most students take the lower division English composition courses, and so the participants in this study represent a wide variety of students, types, and many types of educational goals. Leaders are increasingly held accountable for what students are actually learning in college, and so they should develop pedagogy so that students ultimately benefit. SLOs can be a useful part of the process of meeting this goal. As you may well know, even though the field of online learning is less than 15 years old, distance learning is not new. It has been around since the 1800s. The development of educational theory for distance learning did not really start until the 1970s. Distance learning theory and adult learning theory have contributed to student-centered learning models and pedagogy. Technology can be a very powerful tool for learning, but there's still a lot of work to be done in determining how to use it most effectively, especially in teaching composition. I used a mixed methods research design, and these were my research questions. Is there a statistically significant difference between how college lower division English composition students in online and in face-to-face courses demonstrate mastery of course standards? Number 2, how do students perceive and respond to various teaching methods in online and in face-to-face lower division college courses? And number 3, how might students' perceptions of their learning, analyzed with quantitative data about what they are learning, inform future practices in online and in face-to-face lower division English composition courses? I used 3 data collection sites. These were 3 community college campuses in Southern California. I used 3 assessments to gather quantitative data. I used focus groups and surveys to gather qualitative data. I analyzed the quantitative data using descriptive and inferential statistics to determine how well students performed on SLOs. I examined the qualitative narratives using a thematic analysis to determine if there was a relationship between students' perceptions of SLOs and learning activities and their performances on the assessments. Tedley and Tashikori developed the mixed methods analysis strategy that I used. It's called a parallel mixed methods analysis strategy. After the 2 types of data were analyzed, meta-inferences were drawn from combining the 2 strands of data. I submitted IRB applications that were approved by Cal State Fullerton and the 3 campuses where the data was collected. I used student learning outcome skills for lower division English composition as the units of measurement for this study. They're based on the California State Standards for Community College Courses, which is the authority that established the validity of these measures. The rubric used to score the writing assessments was based on one used by the University of California. In order to prevent threats to the validity of the quantitative data, I conducted Kronbach's coefficient alpha test to determine the internal reliability of the scales used to analyze data. We'll see those next. To minimize threats to the embedded design, I collected the quantitative and qualitative data from the same population. I piloted the instruments in the summer of 2011, and I made some adjustments to them before I used them to collect data in the fall of 2012. The first research question of the study asked whether there is a statistically significant difference between how college lower division English composition students in online and in face-to-face courses demonstrate mastery of course standards. In order to respond to this question, I gave 3 assessments to the study participants. The first 2 were writing assessments, and the third was a reading assessment. These assessments were intended to measure the student's level of mastery of the student learning outcomes. I scored the writing assessments on a 4-point rubric. I used the raw scores from the writing assessment to create scales to use in SPSS, which is the statistical analysis software. I used crosstabs and chi-square to compare the online and face-to-face groups because the data from the writing assessments was non-parametric. I also used raw scores from the reading assessment to create scales to use in the SPSS program. This data was parametric, and so I used independent sample t-tests to compare the performance of the 2 groups on the reading assessment. Also, an ANOVA was used on race variables because of the high number of categories. On the writing assessment, the findings were as follows. There were 2 writing assessments, and on the first writing assessment, the face-to-face group did better on the overall score on this writing assessment. And for the first SLO that I examined, thesis and development, the face-to-face group also did better. On the next SLO, SLO2, which was language use and editing, there was no difference between the 2 groups. On SLO3, MLA and documentation, the face-to-face group did better. On the second writing assessment, the overall score was done better by the face-to-face group, and on SLO1, which was analysis and interpretation, the face-to-face group also did better. On SLO2, for the second writing assessment, which was academic prose, there was no difference between the 2 groups. And on SLO3, using quotes and citations, the face-to-face group did better. I also analyzed the groups based on demographic categories. There is no difference based on age, gender, year in college, or parents' education, even when splitting by face-to-face and online groups. There's also no difference based on race except for on one SLO, thesis and development. The Hispanic students did better. On writing assessment 1, on the overall scores, those students who took no online courses did better than those who had taken at least 1 online course. And on the writing assessment 2 overall score, again, those students who had taken no online classes did better than the ones who had taken online classes. For the reading assessment, I used a 1,700-word passage that was at the 13th grade reading level. Students answered a total of 20 questions on the SLO skills. The data was scalar and parametric. Cronbach's alpha for reliability score was used on the reading assessment, which was 0.702, which is good. In order to analyze the data, I combined the SLO skills into a set of 5 variables. I used independent samples t-test to compare the online and face-to-face groups. However, on one SLO skill, which was summary, it was non-parametric, so I used chi-square on that piece of data. For the reading assessment findings on the independent t-test analysis, there were no differences on the reading assessment between face-to-face and online students, except for only on one SLO. The face-to-face group did better on persona and tone. As far as other findings go, based on demographics for the reading assessment, for the SLO of summary, there was no difference between the groups, but there were a few other things. On the demographics 1, there were no differences in performance based on gender, year in college, and race, even when split by face-to-face and online. There were also no differences based on age, except for the face-to-face 18 to 20-year-old group did better on purpose, method, and audience. And also there was no difference based on parents' education, except for the face-to-face group with parents who had at least one college degree did better on unity and coherence. So that's the end of the quantitative findings. I analyzed the second research question using qualitative inquiry. This question asked, how do students perceive and respond to various teaching methods in online and face-to-face lower division college courses? I asked a series of open-ended questions to focus groups and on surveys. The questions were designed to encourage the students to express their perceptions of how familiar they were with the specific SLO skills and discuss when they learned them, how they learned them, and their relative importance to the execution of proficient academic writing. My intention was to prompt students to discuss their learning processes and progress and to determine if there were any differences between online and face-to-face students and perceptions, levels of confidence, or reported learning activities. I then examined the resulting narrative to discover common threads, and those common threads or themes were definition and importance, prior knowledge and levels of confidence, and descriptions of effective learning activities. And this chart that you see defines how I evaluated the responses in each sub-theme category. So for definition and importance, I used 4 different levels of scales to evaluate the responses. The first one is no evidence. The entire group did not know or could not provide any indication that it understood the definition, importance, or use of the skill. The second category was weak. The group had only 2 or 3 participants who understood the definition or importance of the skill. Basic or solid, 1/2 or 3/4 of the group understood the definition or importance. And then there was a sophisticated level. The group not only understood the definition or importance, it could also go beyond a basic understanding to describe aesthetic qualities and how the elements contributes to the overall meaning of a piece of writing. They could also accurately provide examples, interpretations, and evaluative commentary. The second category, prior knowledge, I also had a group of evaluations. The first one is no evidence. The second one is prior to college, at least 3/4 reported that the SLO skill was learned in elementary, middle, or high school. And in college, at least 3/4 reported that the SLO skill was learned in college, which includes developmental college English courses or in lower division college English courses, either online or face-to-face. And the third category was levels of confidence. There was either no evidence that they had any sort of response to that question, or in 1 or 2 cases they had high confidence, but there's no evidence that they understood the concept. Weak, all except for a few described lack of confidence in knowing or using the SLO skill. Basic or solid, 1/2 or 3/4 of the group expressed confidence and provided evidence that they actually knew the definition, use, or importance of the skill. And finally, there was the sophisticated level, and it's very similar to the other sophisticated level that I already described. And also, the fourth category was learning activities. They reported how they learned these SLO skills, either in the two categories are applying to both modalities. It could be learned using that strategy face-to-face or online, or only unique to online. On the next slide, you can see the evaluations according to their responses. And the differences between the two groups are marked in red. So there are actually not as many differences as you would think. Under definitions and importance, under audience, there's a difference. The face-to-face group had a solid understanding, and the online group had a very solid understanding. Under unity, the face-to-face group had a basic understanding, and the online group had a solid understanding. So you can take a minute to look at those responses. The third question guiding the study allowed for a mixed methods analysis. It asked how might students' perceptions of their learning, analyzed with quantitative data about what they're learning, inform future practices in online and face-to-face lower division English composition courses. Here's a summary of the differences between the online and face-to-face groups. I'll discuss the significance of these findings in a bit. So the differences under quantitative data, the face-to-face group did better on writing assessments overall scores, analysis, interpretation, MLA, persona, and tone. In the qualitative category, the online group did better on unity and coherence, audience, MLA documentation, and one language element. The face-to-face group did better on one language element. There's no differences in the quantitative data between the two groups for language use and editing, academic prose, reading comprehension and evaluation, unity and coherence, writing strategies, and audience. And under the qualitative category, there were no differences between the two groups in thesis and development, persona and tone, writing strategies, and one language element. I also broke these down by demographic groupings. There were differences on the writing assessments. Hispanics did better on thesis and development, and those who had taken no online courses at all did better in all categories than those who had taken at least one online course. And for the reading assessment, the face-to-face 18 to 20-year-old students did better on purpose, writing strategies, and audience, and the face-to-face students who had, with parents who had one college degree, did better on unity and coherence. And there were no differences according to the demographic groupings on the writing assessments in age, year in college, gender, level of parents' education, and on the reading assessment there were no differences in gender, year in college, and race. I also conducted a separate survey specifically on online learning. The students who took the survey had at least one online course, but many of them had taken a lot more than one. The online learning survey questions were also open-ended, and they were designed to encourage students to discuss the effectiveness of the Web 2.0 teaching strategies, why they take online courses, and the instructor's role in online courses. You can see that they categorized the technologies by frequency of use, usefulness, and popularity. The students reported that 100% of the classes they had taken used discussion boards, 90% had used email, and 85% used testing with instant feedback. On the list of newer technologies, they were used less frequently. 40% used podcasts, 40% used embedded videos, 20% used instant messaging, and 15% used wikis. Less than 10% of their classes used video chats, blogging, and social networking. The themes that emerged from this survey were that the students valued instant feedback, time management, the individualized nature of learning online, the efficiency and effectiveness of learning online, community of learners, the central role of the instructor in simulating a face-to-face classroom. This study should be considered a snapshot in time of the progress of online instructional technology and pedagogy, as well as part of an ongoing exploration of English composition assessment in the online and face-to-face learning platforms. Using mixed methods approach proved to yield a fuller understanding of the study's findings by using the qualitative data to enhance an interpretation of the quantitative data. After combining the data, I made the following inferences about the findings. The first one was, the strong face-to-face quantitative overall scores on the writing assessments are somewhat mitigated by the qualitative investigation. While the initial quantitative data revealed that the face-to-face group did better in 4 quantitative categories, when these students were asked to describe, define, and discuss these skills in the qualitative portion of the study, they did not display the quality of responses that the quantitative results implied. Further, there were no differences between the groups in a total of 10 SLO skill categories. In the qualitative portion of the study, the online group did better than the face group in 4 categories. The second inference is that both groups need to make an equal amount of improvement in all SLO skill categories. There was no sophisticated level of understanding by either group in any category. In all categories, both groups had only a very basic to a solid level of understanding of the skills. As a result, it may be inferred that the 2 groups may have more similarities as students than differences. However, possessing shared characteristics as students does not explain the differences in performance on the quantitative writing assessment, and further research needs to be done to explore this discrepancy further now that it has been identified. The third inference is the online group reported more prior knowledge of skills than the face-to-face group, and there was an adequate amount of evidence to support this. It is possible that students who are successful at learning in the online modality may be more prepared at the outset. Online students who are unsuccessful may not be adequately prepared for the task and type of independent learning required in the online learning environment. Nevertheless, although the online group may be ahead at the beginning, the quantitative findings of the study suggest that the face-to-face group is equal to the online group or farther ahead in some areas after completing the college-level composition courses. The fourth inference is that, except for one category, none of the students had high confidence in their skills. The levels of confidence that the students discussed mostly matched their skills. However, in one notable case, although the online students had a high level of confidence, there was no evidence that they understood the concept of persona. In this case, their reported confidence did not match their actual knowledge. Both groups expressed only weak to solid confidence for all of the other skills, which implies that many of these skills need to be reinforced both before the students enter college and during their lower division composition courses. Many of the SLO skills that are in the state standards for lower division college composition, such as language competency, are not unique to the college level. They are also taught as early as elementary school. Indeed, the foundations of many of the SLO skills must be mastered before college in order for the students to write and read for college at a sophisticated level, which the participants in the study in both modalities could not demonstrate for the most part. Most community college programs are required to do remedial work with students, but they are also required to ensure that these students are prepared for upper division courses, especially in transfer-level core courses such as composition. There could be many factors that explain generally low levels of confidence and mastery. Even if these students were exposed to skills in high school that prepared them for college, they may not have absorbed this information for many reasons, such as lack of motivation, lack of psychological or developmental readiness, or language or cultural barriers. The fifth inference is that one of the most notable discoveries of the study is that, for the most part, the online composition students did not discuss learning activities that taught them SLO skills that were specific to online learning, except for when they were very specifically prompted to do so. When they were asked simply when and how they learned the skills, the online students named many activities that were done prior to their online composition courses, or that they used the same textbook-based or classroom-type activity as face-to-face courses. However, when these same online students were asked to rate and discuss the Web 2.0 learning strategies, they could do this very readily. It's possible that they did not or could not identify how the Web 2.0 strategies were used to teach them the specific FLO skills. There was no question in the surveys that made this connection unambiguously clear, and so that needs to be rectified in further research. It could be that students do not make as much of a distinction between online and face-to-face learning as assumed, which should be investigated further. Also, it should be noted that the internet activities that they did discuss could easily also be done by students in face-to-face courses with access to a computer. The sixth inference is that while the older online learning strategies seemed to be working for the students, they reported a very low frequency of use of the newer Web 2.0 strategies. As a result, unfortunately, their usefulness cannot yet be determined. Connecting Web 2.0 strategies specifically to how SLO skills are taught in online composition is a topic for further study. However, some interesting findings connected very clearly to online learning theory. Some of the findings that emerged from the online learning survey that I gave clearly connect to and support many aspects of the distance education theories that were discussed in the literature review. Individualized learning and time management were two aspects of online learning that the participants of the study greatly appreciated. Individualized learning and time management have appeared in the literature since the earliest theories on distance education were posited. Keegan identified independence and autonomy as important areas for theorists to explore, and Wiedemeyer described 6 characteristics of independent study systems, which included the assertion that teaching in the independent study format can be individualized. Other theorists who did work on individualization were Conti, Caribe, and Powell. Their work contended that the online learning environment provides easy access to multiple learning modalities so that the student may choose which activities they prefer, which is also supported in the work of Actemir and Kozalka, Hamilton, Pinnell, Mitchell, and Smith and Reagan. Also, the Means et al. Report suggested that individualization and control over time management are both ways that online learning can be meet the individual needs of students. Another finding of the study was that some students not only appreciate online learning because of the way it can be tailored to individual learning and time management needs, but also because it affords some distance and anonymity that allow many shy students to feel comfortable enough to participate. This finding fits in with the work of Myers and Hamilton Pinnell. Another theme that is the perception of many students that the online environment creates a community of learners. The participants of the study appreciated how some Web 2.0 strategies such as discussion boards simulate face-to-face classrooms and build a learning community online. Several students reported that they had more frequent interaction with their peers online than they did in a face-to-face classroom. I often declare that individualized learning does not necessarily mean isolated learning. The students wanted to be able to interact with their peers, but they also heavily relied on their instructors to guide them. Although the participants appreciated interacting with their peers, they depended on their instructors to build community and to guide their study. Most of the participants considered their relationship with their instructors as crucial. This theme is supported by numerous scholars such as the following: Blackmore, Chickering and Ehrman, Dow, Fink, Finley, Holmberg, Meads et al., Snyder, Tsai, and Wiedemeyer. There is some evidence in learning and development literature at the higher education level that the peer-to-peer relationship is more important to younger learners, such as undergraduate college students from ages 18 to 22. This evidence has been discussed by Salkachov and by Pasquarella and Terenzini. However, 45% of the students who took the online learning survey for this study were ages 18 to 20, which lends some credence to the supposition that younger students who take online courses may also consider their relationship with the instructor to be very important. However, the sample size for the study may not have been large enough to make that conclusion. Also a topic for further study. The participants of this study also considered online learning to be efficient and effective. They wanted to control how and when they learned in an efficient manner without spending time commuting to class or giving up valuable time at their jobs or with their families to attend class. And they wanted courses that were substantial, which is supported by the work of Dodd, Goodwin, Knowles, and Wiedemeyer. Instant feedback was probably the most highly valued by the participants, which was heavily implied in the work of Knowles. He advocated the idea that instruction should allow adult learners to be self-directed, supported by guidance and feedback when students make mistakes. The participants of the study rated online testing with instant feedback and gradebooks with individualized comments among their most preferred online learning tools. In fact, they emphasized the theme of instant feedback and replied to almost every question on the online survey. Probably the biggest revelation to me is the aspects of online learning most highly valued by the students, like individualization and instant feedback, are learning principles that are equally valuable in face-to-face classrooms. And I've been working on ways to incorporate these into my face-to-face environment over the past few years. It is my recommendation that higher education institutions continue to support online learning programs. Even though these programs pose challenges, they meet important needs of a wide variety of students. Online programs not only serve the needs of those who cannot readily attend classes on campus, but the online learning environment is opening up new avenues of teaching technology that may eventually have an important impact on face-to-face learning as well, such as using computers to inject face-to-face classrooms some effective features of online learning like instant feedback and individualized learning. There will continue to be many challenges for everyday practice in the online learning environment. For example, there is some evidence from the study that the more courses that the students took online, the less well they did on quantitative assessments. Again, this finding is somewhat mitigated by the qualitative findings, although it cannot be dismissed lightly. One reason for this outcome could be the busy lives of online students, but ultimately quality should not be sacrificed for convenience. The connection between performance and prior knowledge of the online students should also be explored further. Some literature suggests that hybrid courses can bridge the quality gap. Perhaps the ideal classroom in the future will be hybrids that heavily use technology to provide instant feedback, learning modality flexibility, and time management flexibility, but also keep the best features of face-to-face classrooms, such as personal contact with instructors, peers, and the institution as substantial resources for support. I know of some institutions in California who already use this model quite heavily. As the college-going population in America continues to become more eclectic, creative solutions for meeting the needs of this population could emerge from the support and the study of online learning modality. I will continue to do further research related to this topic. As inquiry tends to, it leads me to ask many more questions, such as what is the role of prior knowledge in the success of online English composition students, and what impact can online learning have on the face-to-face composition classroom. The following slides are the list of references that I used in the study. If you wish to contact me for any reason, you can reach me at lmontagne@csu.fullerton.edu. The study will inform your practice as an educator. It is crucial for practitioners to contribute their voices, experience, and talents to the education literature. I hope to continue in my role as an instructor-scholar, and I wish you well as you do the same in whatever important role you play in higher education.